Hey folks, put the kettle on, it's tea time with Salty Brine. Brace yourself, high-octane action. Tea and chats bring satisfaction. Laugh and sing before we tea you. Yes, we clamor to be near you. Whoa. Now look who we have here. It's Inua Ellams. Whoa! Welcome Inua, welcome audience, welcome folks at home. Salt is here to interview our guest and then we'll go. That's right. Hope we can encourage you to buy tickets to this show. Cause maybe you were on the fence, but now you'll invite all of your friends. So let's cut all this nonsense and sip our tea and get to know Inua Ellams! Oh my goodness. It is a delight to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Oh, here we are. This is my fancy tea show. This is happening right now.
It's beautiful.
Isn't it fun?
It's so amazing.
Do you drink tea?
I do drink tea,
You're a tea drinker?
Yeah, herbal tea mostly.
Okay, well I have a herbal, I'm going to say the H. I'm American, we don't say the H, which is
really?
weird.
Try.
Herbal, yeah, herbal.
Herbal.
Tea.
Herbal.
Herbal. It's a terrible idea.
Herbal
no, it's a
sounds
mistake.
too close to airball. Yeah.
Airball, and you, I'm so
Herbal.
excited to talk to you because you're a wordsmith,
Herbal.
and you're already wordsmithing in front of me. All right, I've got a little bit of honey in here. You've requested a little honey. It's been pre-set for you.
Amazing.
We're just going to top it off with this delicious herbal tea.
Okay.
Look at this, and this very fancy.
Where's the honey from?
The honey, I went out and harvested the honey myself. No,
You're amazing, man.
Imagine if I did.
Yeah.
It's clover honey is what it said on the outside of the package.
Clover.
Yes.
Does that mean it's from the four-leaf clover plant? And
Maybe is that what clover is?
Right.
I
And
literally don't know.
Does that mean it's Irish because of the clover? And then does that mean it's good luck honey?
It's very good luck, honey.
Right.
It is. And I wish you good luck.
Thank you
You have
very
a
much.
relationship to Ireland, don't you?
I do have a relationship, a beautiful relationship.
Oh, I can't
a
wait.
complicated relationship with Ireland. but yeah.
I want to ask you about that. But
Do you have Irish roots?
I do have Irish
You do have Irish roots.
How
Where?
did you know?
Where?
Yeah, I've been to Dublin, which I loved.
I loved
They were
Dublin.
wandering around for like 2 weeks in Dublin, loved it, but I haven't seen the rest of Ireland. Okay, all right, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay, no, to be honest, the west coast of Ireland is gorgeous. So
It's
the
supposed to
things-
be stunning.
It's stunning, yes. Yeah.
Yes. I had a friend that was studying there, and so I went to visit her, and we didn't leave the city. And I regret it, but I want to go back and do
I was there last year for the Dublin Book International Festival. Yeah, I was hosting events and curating shows.
My God. But you lived there, yes? Didn't you?
For 3 years,
3
yeah.
years.
Between 1999 and 2002.
And you lived in Dublin?
Yeah.
What was it like?
It was an experience.
Ah!
Yeah, when I first started schooling there, I was the only black boy in the entire school.
Okay, that's an
And-
experience. I imagine that's an experience.
Exactly, yeah. And Ireland was in its infancy regarding race relations. They didn't quite know what to do with black people. I remember my very first English class, they were reading Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, sure.
A book that I hate with 3 separate types of passions till this day. Ugh.
Wow.
And they just assumed that Africans couldn't read. This is how backwards Dublin was at the time. So the teacher was, students in the class were reading the book, reading pages, and my classmates were stuttering. And because I grew up immersed in literature, I raised my hand offering to read, and the whole class started to laugh at me, including the teacher, because they assumed that Africans couldn't. Either way, that was my introduction into
And then
Ireland.
did you blow them away?
I mean, the stakes are really low if all you're doing is reading, right? So I did, but simply because they thought I
They
couldn't.
thought you couldn't, so that
yeah.
anything would have been impressive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's so. I want to talk to you first about your show.
Yeah.
Your show is called Search Party.
It is called Search Party.
Tell me what it is. What's it about? What happens? Because it's very interactive. It's
Yeah.
unlike anything I think maybe anyone has ever seen. Tell us more.
It has a very simple concept, which I owe partially to Steve Jobs. because I use a tablet for the whole show. And there's
Thank you, Steve.
did you think Steve gave me the idea? Oh, we never met, unfortunately. We will one day.
Yeah.
And I have this app on my tablet which contains everything I've ever written, from tiny little poems and aphorisms to proverbs to long-form essays and whole plays. And what I do is I ask audiences to give me words which I type into the search function and read to them texts that contain their words. And I have no idea, I never really prepare for this show. All I do is come and try to be present in the moment and respond to those in front of me. And it started off as 5 minutes of me doing this in poetry performances into a full-blown hour-long interactive performance. And each show feels like an archival practice where I'm building something new and new connections between text, but it's all informed and steered by the audience.
That's incredible. There's this wild spontaneity about what you've built, which I'm a performer myself, and that scares me. The thought of going out there and not knowing what's going to happen. Does it scare you, or do you like?
No, I sort of like it. I hate being in positions of control. And, you know, the Kanye West has this quote, "No one man should have all that power." You know, and Spider-Man says, "With great power comes great responsibility." And all of those things in various degrees terrify me to the bones. So I feel as if constructing my own, warped sense of importance and using that to choose pre-select text to read to an audience somehow means I'm imposing myself on them. Whereas if we steer the night together, there's something more egalitarian and democratic about that, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, you have a quote that I found. Let me see if I can find it. That you approach poetry in an attempt to democratize language. You literally using that word, democracy.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, to democratize language?
Well, there are hierarchies of power inbuilt and implicit in language and in the uses of language. And language evolves and changes with each age, with each generation, each demographic. And there's something in the attempt to write poetry which necessitates you pinning your construction of the importance of language down on paper. But when you give it to the reader, they decide the importance of the text. The power dynamic changes drastically. And I always teach this and say this to my students. If you read a poem and you don't get it, it's because I didn't care enough about you to write it, and then it's on me, right?
It's on the poet.
It's on the poet, yeah. I failed you as an audience member, and I profoundly believe that. So there's something democratic in that process itself.
And do you feel that about it as a theater maker too, this idea that if the audience doesn't connect that night in the show, that do you feel that you failed the audience?
To a certain extent, yes, you know. And everything is a performance. All the world is a stage and we're all merely players, you know. And I think I involve the actors, the audience in the performance itself. So we're building the night together.
It feels very inclusive. They feel included, which is incredible. So people are shouting out, you're asking for what, words from people?
Yeah.
And then you're going into this Steve Jobs pad in front of you. Are there pieces in there? 'Cause I don't know how many, hundreds and hundreds of
about
works?
450. I think I counted them yesterday.
Of short things, long things.
Yeah.
Are there pieces that come up or words you hear where you go, oh no, now I got to do this one? Do you feel a sense of dread ever?
All the time.
Yes.
When things come up, and I then apologize to the audience, and I'm really sorry, but you asked for this, and then we go into it. Yeah, but they're just like really terrible poems, which I'm aghast that I wrote, but it's there, and I have to honor the conceit of the show, so I read it regardless.
Does that become a moment of comedy in the show to laugh about?
Yeah. And there's something I love about an artist honoring their journey and the fact that you're human beings on a constant journey, constantly evolving themselves. And sometimes I rediscover phrases and poems that I haven't opened in, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, which occur in poems that are working now, and understand how it's transformed into something else. And it's still me in the continuity of understanding my life and who I am and how the world meets me.
So that's so interesting, because as you've been describing it, I sort of thought, well, you must look at all 450 of these things regularly as you go into the show, but you don't. You don't go back so you're rediscovering them too in a moment.
The text, all
so
the
then
time.
There must be surprises for you.
Yeah. I stumbled across the first ever sonnet I attempted, which I wrote when I was 16 or so in Dublin. And I remember it was months after my best friend had taken his own life.
Oh, God.
And I was trying to memorialize the vibe, our relationship, which existed purely on argument, where we didn't care who won the argument. The point was just to be verbose with language.
Yes.
And I tried to pin that down somehow. That was one of the very first things that I ever wrote of my own volition.
And the sonnet is about that kind of. And do you like to argue?
I would say no. My girlfriend would say yes. yes. She
Wow.
has a nickname
But you're
for
aware
me.
that that's true, so that's something.
She calls me panelist because she came to a panel I was having with a bunch of artists at the British Museum. The Tate Britain in London, and all the artists all agreed with each other. We just sounded and felt very boring to me.
Yeah.
So I became this antagonist and I disagreed with everything that they said. And because of that, till this day, every time I argue with her, she calls me panelist.
The panelist.
Yeah.
Well, disagreement does seem important, and being able to have a disagreement.
Yeah.
And still be okay. I mean, I love what you're saying about this friend, this very close friend of yours, who you, like, arguing was not a point of contention. It was a part of the friendship. It was what made the...
Once we spent 4 hours arguing about the color of the sky. Literally. We were late for class because we refused to go.
You were just like, we must discuss this now.
We must discuss this, yeah.
I love that. You're the only artist credited for this show, Search Party, on the Under the Radar website. Do you have collaborators on this? It's all you? Do you have an outside eye ever?
No, I mean, the only collaborator would be Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I'm not giving him any
And the audience, I guess.
No. Yeah, and
becomes
the audience,
the collaborator.
Yeah. But besides that, no, it's just me and my tablet traveling around. Yeah.
Is that typically how you work, or is this show sort of standalone in that way?
This is just the standalone thing.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I work in theater, so with lighting designers,
you have the whole
costume
team,
designers, and everyone. Yeah.
Highly collaborative. Yeah.
And I think the loneliness of being on the road is what necessitates this, because then I'm in collaboration, arguably with more people that I would in constructing a play, is the entire audience.
That's incredible. And do you feel like you get to know them? Is there a sort of a back and forth in that way?
Yeah. Sometimes if I don't have a word that the audience member has suggested, then it dissolves into a sort of town hall meeting where we're looking for adequate synonyms and people are suggesting things. So it becomes a conversation,
Yeah. I as a performer, I feel like theater people talk about this all the time when you do live performance. You know the kind of audience you have. Audiences can be so different, and then when you step out on stage, it takes about 5 or 10 seconds, and you go, I see.
Yeah.
They could be very quiet or very boisterous.
Yeah.
Does that affect?
Definitely does, because I listen to them, I key into their moods, how voluble they are with laughter, and I try and gauge their mood, and that helps me steer the show in some direction, as much steer as I have.
Yeah, because you don't have a lot of control, but there is some, you have some sort of leeway.
And what I also try and do in real time is find connections between the poems. So if there's a first poem and it's about fatherhood, for instance, and they give me another word and I type in, and maybe there are 4 or 5 options, and try and pick something that's also in keeping with that. So there's a sort of live dramaturgy happening in real time.
That you're shaping.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love that. Your poetry is influenced by hip hop and classical poetry, and you have been described as the love child of Mos Def and John Keats.
Yeah.
You have a amazing poem about John Keats, or to John Keats, which I
Yes.
read and I actually listened to you perform and
Okay.
loved.
Thank you.
Was obsessed. What do hip hop and classical poetry have in common? What's the intersection of that for you?
The first thing is, especially the metaphysical poets, they found so many ways of tapping into not just what is seen, but what isn't seen.
Mm-hmm.
Not just what is heard, but what isn't heard. And the language was so rich and so detailed and so meticulous that it's easy to get lost in it and rediscover rhythms and rhyme schemes internalized within the language itself. And then there's the decorative aspects of language, which we don't really do. And a parallel is to read any Shakespeare play and compare it to how we write plays now. We don't have to write plays like that because language has changed and it speaks to this current generation and the evolution of language itself. But there is an attempt to beautify text, which Shakespeare wrote implicitly in his plays, which we no longer do with language now for various reasons. And that's what I loved about the classical poets, the John Keats, the John Donnes of that era. There's this attempt to make a brooch of the poem, to find the intricate structures within language and use that to add weight to what it is they're describing. And the thing is, rappers do the exact same thing. The most lyrically dense, athletic minds. They do incredible things with internal rhyme schemes that create pace and intensity and beautify language, often when they're talking about really disgusting and difficult things.
Yeah.
And I understand that language, that attempt to make something out of nothing, to make a, was the line from Tupac, to make a rose grow from concrete, So I love this connection, this negotiation with masculinity, with beauty, and with text, and with presence, and with bearing witness to the world as you find yourself in it.
Incredible. How did you discover classical poetry? I mean, is this something that you loved from an early age? Or
when I lived in Dublin, my basketball coach was also my poetry teacher. Mm-hmm. And he expected, I know, right?
But that's beautiful. I mean, that's
beautiful.
A human being.
Yeah. And he expected absolute, what's the word? He expected us to embody both sides of him. Mm-hmm. Him on the court and him in the classroom. Him appealing to our physical prowess and him appealing to our intellectual prowess. And in an attempt to honor him, I just fell in love with his classroom, which meant falling in love with the text he was teaching us.
Yeah.
But because I ended up doing my English assignment with the entire basketball team, who were all avidly obsessed with hip-hop, I began to listen to contemporary hip-hop whilst dissecting Shakespeare and Seamus Heaney, etc. So both things began to occupy my head in the same space in the same time.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I think I fell in love with poetry when I realized reading it out loud was fun.
Yes.
There was something about studying like classical poetry and thinking like I have to sit here and just read it in my head, and the leap to being able to put the words in my mouth changed everything. I mean, and you work with spoken word poetry, and hip hop is so, as you say, physical, which is incredible because when you start talking, your body starts moving. Is there something about speaking language out loud? Do you write things that are to be read?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do a lot. I spent a lot of time studying the classicals and studying what poems delivered on a page can do to the poem itself, how to create suspense with line breaks, how white space on the page actually creates movement and shift and space for the reader to digest things. So I spent ages dissecting all of that. But I'm from West Africa, where there's an oral tradition in storytelling, as there is in Greece and Italy, etc. But I grew up in that tradition where we shared stories vocally, and it created space for the listener to take the story and add elements of their personality into their own retelling of the story to other people. So there's this energy that comes, that is rooted in my youth, in the sharing of poetry.
That's incredible, this oral tradition. You grew up were you in Nigeria?
Yeah.
Is that right? Until you were 12? Born in Nigeria. What influenced you during that time, before you moved to Dublin?
Yeah.
Is this oral storytelling tradition, were there other things that brought you to the arts?
I think, so my father was a Muslim when he married my mother, who was a Christian. And I used to go to the mosque and the church when I was a kid. So I'd watch the pastor perform as he would before his congregation.
Yes.
And he would retell stories from the Bible, using Nigerian rhythms of language to translate, to communicate, to seed the stories deeper in the heart of his congregation. So that was a performance in itself. I'd also go to the mosque and listen to the imam pray, and I couldn't speak Arabic, and I still can't speak Arabic. So I was understanding the emotion behind what he was trying to communicate. And then I went to boarding school where I'd read the Bible like a novel with torchlight under the duvet. It never landed as biblical holy text. It sounded like this crazy ass novel with X-Men, right? Flying all over, performing miracles everywhere. And then my father was an incredible storyteller. When men would come around to the house, he'd sit there eating and telling stories, and I would see this performer entertain people purely with his voice, with how he stood, how he shifted his weight and his feet to embody characters. So I grew up in that. So I just sort of fell into it the older I got. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I can tell just from speaking to you that you must be very enigmatic on stage and such a good storyteller. Are you a good storyteller at a party? Do you feel,
no.
Do you know, do you know what I mean?
In parties, I tend to slink to the background and watch everything. Now and then I'm invited to fundraisers for the National Theatre in the UK.
Yes.
And when I'm sat, these huge tables beside BAFTA award-winning actors, Olivia Colman and all of these people, I just feel out of place. And I try to hang out in the kitchen besides the staff or the waiters, who then feel weird that I'm a guest, but I'm hanging around and they tell me to sit down. So I sort of, in parties, I think I always occupy liminal positions. And I think as a poet, it is my duty and my job to do so, to watch from without rather than from within. So I'm always kind of like there looking at society as opposed to be in the center of things, unless I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you put yourself up on stage and the lights and the audience and whatever and take space, but your life is spent observing.
Yeah.
This show, Search Party, seems to be in this liminal space between poetry and theater.
Yeah.
What's that line for you? When does it cross over? When does spoken word poetry become theater? Or
I'm still discovering that. My very first play was a one-person show, autobiographical, which I wrote largely in verse, and I stand on stage and tell the story. And so this day, whenever I approach a theater who want to commission work, I tell them right off the bat, I'm not sure the form in which you're going to get this story. It could be a play mostly with dialogue, or it could be a narrative third-person piece. I don't know. So I think the story dictates its form to me rather than the other way around, and I wait to see.
You find out as you go.
Yeah.
Is that your process with everything?
Yeah.
You don't know if it's going to be a short poem or a full play. You just don't know. You
Absolutely.
sit down.
Yeah, I wait for the words to come.
And it comes to you.
Yeah.
I read a story about one of the first plays that you wrote was a reworking of Romeo and Juliet. Is that true? And
Yes,
it
was.
didn't go well?
No,
Can you tell us that story?
So this is when I just fallen in love with my poetry teacher, and he was teaching us Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And I remember having watched the Baz Luhrmann Shakespeare with what's his name, Leo DiCaprio.
Yes.
And I loved it. And I somehow convinced my poetry teacher and basketball coach to let me put on a production of Romeo and Juliet, but I would get rid of the boring bits and make it shorter and localize it in Dublin. So just put lots of Dublin Irish slang words into it. And then I cast the entire play with the basketball team and their love interests to create the perfect environment for one to kiss the one he fancied and vice versa. But, we had one disastrous rehearsal and that was it. Nothing ever came. But I
It didn't get presented?
Nothing. No, it was horrible.
I really wish I could see it.
Yes.
You would have literal couples, these young couples, and cast them in the love interest roles.
Yeah.
Was there drama?
There was drama, but a couple till this day are together. Yeah, they have married with 2 kids now. I take full responsibility.
I think you should.
for that relationship.
I wonder if they tell the story of the time that they were in Romeo and Juliet together.
Oh, I will text them. We're still in a WhatsApp group.
Yeah, I would love to know.
Yeah.
Now you live in London.
I do.
Does London influence you?
Yes.
How long have you been there?
Since 2002. I moved back from Dublin, and I've been there ever since. I love London.
Yeah, do you?
It's my city. Sometimes I walk through it in the way Batman walks through Gotham. You know, I look for crimes to solve. I have this false sense of superiority of nothing, really. But I love the city.
It's like a kind of ownership.
Yeah. I really do.
Did you feel that right away?
Yes. I think when I was a kid in Nigeria, I grew up watching British television. So there was a familiarity with London before I ever stepped foot on it. And then between 2002 and 2011, because of my immigration difficulties, it was illegal for me to work. So I used to walk through the streets of London writing poetry, sometimes giving the poems to strangers and disappearing before they could critique it in front of me.
Yes.
But also, I devised an artistic practice called the Midnight Run, where I would gather strangers to explore the streets of my city from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. or from 6 p.m. to midnight. And I'd invite local artists to design workshops in site-specific locations. Some of them were poetry writing exercises, which I would devise myself. But sometimes there were puppeteers and jazz players and mindful eating enthusiasts and Tai Chi instructors. So in doing that and constructing these paths, through the city, I would create a mobile village to migrate through the urban sphere, and that brought a closer relationship between me and the city of London, hence my Batman complex. Yeah.
I want to know London through your eyes in the middle of the night. That sounds so thrilling.
I have all the routes that I've mapped going almost 25 years now.
Okay, well, the next time I go to London, I'm going to be calling you. Do you have a relationship with New York City?
I'm cultivating one.
It's
Yes,
here you are. Have you been here before?
Yes, I've been here many times,
Yeah, many times. Do you, besides performing, you're very busy. Are you going to do stuff in New York while you're here? Is there something you're longing to do?
Whilst I'm here, I'm mostly hanging around with my friends at a New York Theatre Workshop. I'm going to drop in. I have a couple of friends who live here in Brooklyn, so I'm going to try and find time to hang around with them. But I also have 2 deadlines and things that I have to work with. So
yes, you seem very busy.
Writing,
and your bio is amazing. It's like fancy. The word royal comes up many times.
I know. I'm disgusted by that.
You're disgusted by it.
Yeah.
But it makes you look fancy.
Yeah.
It does that.
It makes me, you know, as a perfect. Yes, exactly. There's a relationship here.
It's this gesture.
Yes. Yeah.
It has been an absolute delight chatting with you.
Has it been 25 minutes
already? So it has. It's gone by.
Goodness.
Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, Inua Ellams, thank you so much. Search Party is at Lincoln Center, and it's running through the 13th. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think so. You must check it out. Thank you so much. Thanks to the studio audience. Thank you. Nate White, take it away.
Thank you so much.